All right, let me tell you a little bit about her. As you probably know, she's a nature and science writer. She mostly lives in southern New Mexico in the beautiful Gila Valley, where she has taught at Western New Mexico State University. She is teaching now for Antioch in their low residency MFA program. She's written a bunch of books, mainly creative nonfiction, but also some fiction and science fiction. Some of her books include Diary of a Citizen Scientist, that came out a few years back. We did an event for that. She's got a book called Standing in the Light. That work is on pantheism. She's got a book called Hunger, an Unnatural History. The book that we're talking about tonight, Within Our Grasp, expounds upon that work that she started years ago with Hunger. She's written also about archaeology, flowers, butterflies, a charmed life, folks. I know she's going to talk to us a little bit more about writing and about this current work. She is the winner of a John Burroughs Medal, a Rockefeller Fellowship, my tongue is getting twisted, and many other book awards. So I think I will let her get right into this. Sharman, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about where you are and what is happening in your world.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. Yes, I think before I start talking, we give a little context of where I am. I live in southern New Mexico in the Gila, of course, but a few days ago, we took my father-in-law back home. So I'm now in Washington, D.C., and this is a back bedroom in his apartment in Washington, D.C. So I'm a little discombobulated because I'm not in New Mexico and I'm not in my own living room and I don't have my own computer. This is my second reading or talk about Within Our Grasp. And I am still a little nervous about that. And believe me, there's always good reason to be nervous about a live presentation. But one of the tricks I've learned is that no matter, it doesn't really matter what kind of mistake I make or if I say something silly or look silly, because it's really about the subject matter. And the subject matter is almost always more important than I am. And that's particularly true in this case, childhood malnutrition. It's becoming more urgent and you know, it's a sad subject. You have come here tonight not for entertainment or for comic relief. You've come here out of empathy, I think, and a certain fortitude. I know when I first started writing about childhood malnutrition years ago, over 20 years ago, I was afraid that the pain of that, the pain of a child dying for lack of food, would somehow negate the joy in my own life, that it was dangerous to juxtapose those two things. And to some extent, that's true. We can't deny the grief of a child going hungry. And we can't deny the grief of our failure of not feeding all our children. At the same time, I have found a lot of wonder and inspiration and hope in this subject, or I really could not have kept writing about it. There is wonder, there is really true wonder in the miracle of the body and the way we take in food and nutrients, metals and molecules, and we turn that into who we are, into story and action and movement and love. And that's just miraculous. There's inspiration in all the people around the world in every country working to end childhood malnutrition. You can marvel at the harm we do each other, since so much human suffering is caused by other humans, or you can marvel at the compassion we have for each other, for the tenderness we have for strangers, for the body of people on this earth, which is our body too. And there is hope. There is real hope that we could end childhood malnutrition and stunting. Well, I think some people would think that that is too hopeful, that that's kind of naive in these challenging times. It is true that conflict increases hunger, You've seen more images of hungry children in places like Yemen and Syria, war-torn countries. Hunger particularly increases when families have to leave their homes. And it is true that hunger increases with climate shocks, with drought, and with erratic weather patterns. And we're going to see more of that in the coming years. And it's true that hunger increases with disease. So we have seen increased hunger in the last year, and we're going to see more hunger in the coming year. At the same time, the vast majority of children who have been damaged by malnutrition, who are hungry, don't live in war-torn countries. They live in countries like India, Guatemala, Malawi, and they have been there a long time. They are not the result of any single conflict or shock. So the big picture is not about any one event. It's much larger than that. The other thing that's happened is in the last 20 years, we've really experienced a kind of revolution in how we understand childhood malnutrition. So we used to diagnose severely malnourished children, and we would send them to the hospital, and we would have good medical care. We would also be exposing them to disease, and we were also giving them the wrong kinds of food. And about half of them would die. But we no longer do that. We diagnose severely malnourished children, and then we send them home. We send them home with their mothers and their fathers, and this kind of miraculous protocol of ready-to-use therapeutic food. And it's this kind of packet of creamy, buttery paste that has all the right vitamins and minerals and everything that the malnourished child needs. We've learned so much more about the role of vitamins and minerals in the human body. We've learned so much more about the primary importance of empowering women, of sanitation, of sustainable agriculture. So we have this holistic approach now that really works. So it really is within our grasp. Before I start talking about the world, I thought I would talk about hunger here in America, here where we live. Many of you, I think, know the statistics. About 1 out of every 6 American children live in a household that is food insecure. In New Mexico, that would be more like 1 out of 3 because it's a poor state and because of the pandemic. So this would be a child who doesn't always know when his or her next meal will be. These children particularly go hungry over the weekend. They really look forward to the free school breakfast and school lunches. They really suffer then more on the weekend and in the summer. And of course, in this last year when schools have been closed. One of the things we are doing now for hungry children in America is supporting our food banks and our food pantries. In New Mexico, Roadrunner is the largest food bank. They service about 70,000 people a week. And a food bank just gathers in all the, it's kind of food rescue. And they gather in food from food industries, from restaurants, from grocery stores, from donors, and then they redistribute it out to pantries. And I've been involved with Roadrunner for the last 15 years because I worked at the food pantry in Silver City, and now I work at the food pantry in the Gila Valley. So I really know that joy of when the Roadrunner truck comes. It's a huge truck. It has this friendly, green and yellow logo. I'm looking forward to the summer and to the fall when a lot more produce comes. Produce is particularly important. Healthy food is particularly important at food pantries. In America, the greatest childhood malnourishment we have is childhood obesity under the age of 5. And this is not just an American problem. The vast majority of obese children under the age of 5 actually live in Africa and Southern Asia. And that's because hunger in children actually leads to excess weight. So in America, a child who is insecure, who doesn't know when her next meal would be, might tend to overcompensate and gain weight. Children who live in food deserts, whose main access is to cheap, convenient, highly processed fast food might tend to gain weight. And children who have been malnourished in their first 1,000 days of life, this starts in the womb up into the second birthday and into actually up into age 5. Children who have been malnourished during that time, and this includes vitamins and minerals deficiencies, they have been physically programmed to gain weight as adults. This is what we call the double burden of overnutrition and undernutrition in a lot of countries around the world. So for a child especially, a deficiency in vitamins and minerals has lifelong consequences. The leading cause of preventable blindness in children is a lack of vitamin A. The leading cause of preventable brain damage in children is a lack of iodine. 2 billion people, that's a lot of people, 2 billion people on Earth are deficient in a metal like iron and zinc. And iron, you know, I have rhapsodies to iron in this book within our grasp. I've just become in awe of that particular mineral, because that idea that we come from the earth, that we take in the earth and it becomes who we are, that's not just a conceit. That's not just a metaphor. It's literally true. Perhaps half of the proteins in your body contain a metal like iron and zinc. Iron right now is poetically circulating in your bloodstream, gathering up oxygen and taking it to every place, you know, in your body that you need. What is really impressive to me after doing so much research in childhood malnutrition is the very specific relationship of iron to neurological development. So a child, again, in that first 1,000 days of life who isn't getting enough iron will have a reduced attention span, a harder time grasping concepts, delays in language and motor skills, greater anxiety, be more socially withdrawn. So you can see again that connection of how much food and nutrients is who we are as human beings. Okay, let's see. I'm going to ask for a teleprompter for Christmas if I do enough Zooms. So before I leave America, I want to return to one more memory about Roadrunner Food Bank and about hunger in America. So it's 2004. I was writing a book called Hunger: A Natural History. And I was sitting in the director's office at the Roadrunner Food Bank. And there was a picture on the wall. And it wasn't a very good picture. It kind of had a black blob and a red blob. And so I could see it was probably done by a small child. But a teacher had translated what that child wanted to say. And what that child wanted to say was, this is a man who is angry because he just wants food. And that really powered me for a number of years, because it brought home how much anger and shame is part of being hungry, part of being hungry in one of the world's, you know, wealthiest countries. And so, like I say, that was kind of an important moment for me. Then at the end of Hunger: A Natural History, I have a paragraph in the conclusion. And I'm moving now to my handout on my paragraph of Hunger and a Natural History, because I'm just going to read and summarize that paragraph. And remember, it's in 2004. This was 17 years ago that I wrote this. In 2004, the Coalition, National Anti-Hunger Organizations in America, came up with a blueprint to end hunger in this country. The first step is to strengthen existing programs. Reach out to the 40% of people who are eligible for food stamp benefits. Now, at that time, they called them food stamp. Now we call them SNAP. And so it goes on. Strengthen what we already have. Reach out to the people who are eligible. Make the eligibility more fair and inclusive. Reach out to the elderly and disabled. Strengthen our school breakfast and lunch programs. The second step is to reduce poverty in America, raise the minimum wage, expand employment opportunities, support programs for the working poor, protect vulnerable groups such as senior citizens and the disabled. This is not rocket science. The solution to hunger in America is not a secret, said the NAHO. We have both the knowledge and the tools. So that was 17 years ago. And in my opinion, the solutions are still the same. It's still not rocket science. The solutions are the same. Strengthen existing programs, reduce poverty. And unfortunately, the numbers are still pretty much the same. In some years, the numbers of food insecure children in America has gone up, and in some years it's gone down in the last 17 years. But there hasn't been this dramatic improvement. I am going to say, this may be irrepressible, but I am going to say that I really have more hope now than I have for some time. And that's because it seems that we have the opportunity now in this crisis, in this terrible crisis, to seize the time, to seize the momentum, and to end child hunger in America. I'm thinking of the child tax credit that would very quickly have child poverty in America. I'm thinking of the proposal for an affordable daycare for parents. I'm thinking of our increased examination of racism and inequity in America. So maybe this is the opportunity that we can grab as a society to end child hunger in America. That would be extraordinary. Okay, the world. There are a lot of similarities, so there are some similarities between America and the world. Obesity, vitamin mineral deficiency, food insecurity. But there are also some important differences. And one of the biggest differences is the physical extremity which children suffer in other parts of the world. So when you look at that searing image of a skeletal child, you're looking at what the World Health Organization calls wasting. That's a horrible word, wasting. You're looking at a body that's cannibalizing itself, that's stealing fat reserves from every part of the body, that's stealing muscles from every part of the body, even from the heart getting smaller, that's stealing vitamins and minerals from non-essential systems like eyesight to give them to more essential systems. You're looking at a body that will eventually die without intervention. The truth is, though, that a much more common form of childhood malnutrition is something we don't see as often in the media. And that's what the World Health Organization calls stunting. And stunting is another terrible word. So almost all of us as humans have the same growth pattern in our first 5 years of life. And because of that, so what kicks in later, your genetic potential for being tall or short, is something that happens later in childhood after the first 5 years. And because of that, the World Health Organization can have standards for how children should be growing in those first 5 years and can see if a child's growth is faltering and if that child isn't getting enough food and nutrients. And if that is the case and the child is too short for his or her age, we call that stunting, childhood stunting. Unfortunately, it's not reversible. A stunted 2-year-old becomes a stunted 10-year-old, becomes a stunted adult. Almost one quarter of the world's children are stunted. That's extraordinary. Almost 1/4 of the world's children have been damaged by malnutrition. And that's because stunting, a stunted adult is not the miracle of the body. It's not how we are meant to be. A stunted adult is more at risk for impaired organ function, for impaired immune system, for cognitive problems. A stunted adult is more at risk for diabetes, for stroke, for heart disease, for anxiety, for learning disabilities. Again, there's this range of physical and mental consequences when we don't get the nutrients we need as young children. So the truth is that most malnourished children do not die. Some do, about 3 million a year, but the rest go on to lead a life of diminished potential. They do less well at school, they do less well at work, they're sick more often. They often remain in poverty because malnutrition is both a cause of poverty and a result of poverty. I don't think I have talked yet about the rewards of feeding our children. I've talked more about the cost. Economists have told us this again and again. For every dollar we invest in nutrition, society will get back 18. I think the economic cost of not feeding our children is something like 3.5 trillion a year. And that's an increased health cost and in lowered productivity. The environmental cost has been less articulated, and the environmental reward has been less articulated. And that, I suppose that's what interested me as a nature and science writer. What is the relationship between healthy children and a healthy earth? So to talk about that, I'm going to give a reading from the book. It's from the prologue. It's probably about 6-7 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions and answers. Oh, no, then I have my family vacation slides from Malawi that I'm looking forward to showing to you. All right, so this is the prologue, and it's called "This Blue Marble Spinning in Darkness." I was 18 years old in 1972 when astronauts in space took a photograph of the Earth, this blue marble spinning in darkness. Suddenly, we were aware of our absolute dependence on this planet, oddly aware that, yes, this was our home. Like many young people in the environmental movement, I thought then of the Earth as my mother, how we are shaped in her womb, how we drink from her every day, eat from her every day, how she nurtures us with so many gifts, so much beauty, how she loves every one of us. Later, as I had children of my own, and as the human population in the world doubled and would soon triple, I replaced the image of mother with that of lover. We are a new skin covering the earth with our need, our greed, our tenderness. We are the storytelling animal, unraveling and restitching forest and field, our human consciousness interpenetrated, mated with the earth. It is too easy to joke about marital problems. Instead, I give the metaphor its due. We are the bride of the world, and we are the groom. And now, as I wonder what the earth will be like in the middle and end of this century and beyond, as I look at decisions we are making and not making, now I think of the future as our child, and this catches at my heart. This makes me feel something new. A child dies from hunger, and the suffering of this one child is enough to catch our heart. We look at the photo of that little girl, her thin face and two bright eyes, the way she points every bit of her dying self at the camera, and we think, this isn't hard. I'll take her home. What's in the refrigerator? I'll make some soup. What we can hardly fathom is the physical and mental stunting of nearly 1 in 4 of the world's children due to a lack of food or nutrients. 1 in 4. Almost a third of the children in much of Africa and Southern Asia. More than 150 million stunted children under the age of 5, with another 50 million children wasted or threatened by weight loss or failure to gain weight. These numbers are too big. Perhaps we're sitting at a computer desk or reading over breakfast. Our shoulders loosen, our arms and legs relax. There's nothing we can do. Well, of course, this whole book is about the things that we can do and that there are things we can do. And I talk about that in some of the prologue. But I'm going to skip down and go to the part that focuses on the environment. The future that is our child is the future of a hotter earth and a degraded environment, a future of increasing shocks and the need for greater resilience. Ending childhood malnutrition is neither a digression nor a distraction from that urgency. We have failed so far to find the collective will to slow down greenhouse gas emissions. We have failed to acknowledge the human interdependence that laces this earth. Perhaps our thinking has been too small. Perhaps we have been too narrowly focused on parts of carbon dioxide per million, on numbers and statistics. Perhaps our resolve will only be ignited by a larger story of who we are and who we want to be. Feeding all our children begins with the understanding that they are all our children. that we are one body on the body of the earth, and that we are all responsible for what happens on this earth. The next generation of healthy children and adults cannot be separated from a healthy environment, and the fight for a healthy environment cannot be separated from the needs and desires of human beings. It is not either or. It is not regulating the use of fossil fuels or empowering women, photovoltaics or better sanitation, reforestation or ending poverty, biodiversity or public health systems that protect us from disease. It is all of them together. We are a new skin covering the earth, and by this I mean we are 7.8 billion strong. For many years, overpopulation has been one of our great concerns. In the 1970s, this blue marble of earth spinning in darkness became for some the image of a lifeboat lost at sea, a desperate situation of limited resources and too many people. That cultural trope lingers and may still have value in teaching us about the limits of a planet or an ecosystem. But the idea that children must die to prevent overpopulation has been proven wrong. The opposite is true. The link between population growth and child death and malnutrition is now clear. When parents know all their children are going to survive and flourish, they tend to have smaller families. When women have access to education, employment, and birth control, they tend to have smaller families. When people live in a healthy and functional society, they tend to have smaller families. The good news is that most of the world has reached this point. Fertility rate is the average number of children a woman will have in her lifetime. Our global fertility is now 2.4, down from almost 5 in 1950. The reasons for this have to do with urbanization, greater economic prosperity for both women and men, and literacy for both women and men. In Bangladesh, there is a new saying, 2 are good, 1 is better. In Bangladesh, women on average have 2.1 children. In Mexico, 2.2. In Brazil, 1.7. So I talk a little bit now that unfortunately the decline in fertility doesn't mean we're going to see a big decline in numbers soon, because the next generation is going to add their children to the population. People like me who are living longer and longer, old people we're going to add our numbers to the population. And women who are impoverished, families whose children are still dying from malnutrition and who are still becoming stunted, they will continue to have more children than their replacement rate. So ending increased population growth means empowering those women and feeding those children. In other ways too, the goals of humanitarians and environmentalists are aligned. The majority of the extremely poor are farmers living on small plots of land. Helping smallholder farmers is all about building soil and planting trees that sequester carbon. Healthy children require clean air and water, as well as cheap, sustainable alternative energies that heat homes and cook food. Healthy children need a stable environment and a commitment to mitigating global warming. Healthy children become part of an educated society that values biodiversity and understands our dependence on the earth. We come from the earth, turning plants and animals who also come from the earth into energy and movement and thought and story. It is as simple and miraculous as that. We come from the earth and we have become the earth. We are the storytelling animal, telling stories about ourselves and our future. Feeding our children is such a good story. Well, that's the end of my talk part. I think Amanda has a few slides she's going to show now. Most of this book within our grasp takes place in Malawi. And Amanda?
One second.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, most of the book takes place in Malawi. It was a visit in 2016, and So I just have a few pictures of that because that's really the heart of the book. Malawi is called the warm heart of Africa for its friendliness. It's a very poor country. 80% of the Malawi people are smallholder farmers. More than 80% don't have electricity. They don't have running water. Childhood stunting is high. At that time, it can be as high as 42%. It's going down now. But this is a women's group that happens to be in Lilongwe, the capital city, and it's a small microfinance group. And the woman in front with the blue who's grinning and hugging her daughter is Fanny. She was a Facebook friend before I went to Malawi and continues to be a Facebook friend. So next slide. But mostly what I was doing was visiting villages. And so there at the edge there, you can see me, maybe you can just see part of me following a line of people to we're going to be visiting a smallholder farmer. We were there in the fall, in the dry season. That's what Malawi looks like in the dry season. So next slide. But just like New Mexico, wherever you have water, suddenly you have this wonderful growth. So that day we went to Norera Sauka's field, and she was growing the vitamin A enriched orange fleshed sweet potato. And that's what happens as soon as you apply water to Malawi. It gets very green. You have these wonderful gardens. And Norera, the smallholder farmer I'm referring to, looks very stunning and chic in her purple blouse. Beautiful Chiting day. Okay, next slide. And of course, I visited a number of villages, and these are just some women in the village. Sanitation is a big deal, and it's really hard to cook and to clean and to wash clothes and to stay hydrated when you have to fetch your water from a well that's a mile away. And so not having electricity, not having running water, these women work so hard. And that's partly a cause of childhood malnutrition, is the sheer exhaustion that women experience in parts of the world. So next slide. This is that ready-to-use therapeutic food that this is a clinic that mothers have brought their children to. They've already been diagnosed by a health worker perhaps, or by the mother herself as malnourished. At the clinic, that's being confirmed, and they're going to be sent home with these packets of ready-to-use therapeutic food. Next slide. And this is just the clinic still. That woman in the middle with the red glasses on is kind of in charge. She's the heart of the clinic, Rose. She was a nurse 20 years ago when all the excitement was happening, when they were developing ready-to-use therapeutic food, and she was helping mix it up in a blender of peanut butter and mineral and vitamin mix and skim milk and sugar and oil, and coming up with this formula that has since saved the lives of millions of children, and also, brought them out of the range, out of the danger of becoming stunted children. Next slide. And part of the, so one of the themes of the book is the approaches we can use now to successfully deal with malnutrition, and they're holistic, and there's many of them, but one of them is private enterprise, to kind of break out of the box of just having organizations give food and nutrients, but to actually have within a country manufacture of local crops with a local factory, create these kind of fortified snack that parents could buy or perhaps be subsidized and given to see their children grow kind of before malnourishment even happens. It's hard perhaps for us to imagine because we live in a world of fortified food. We have lots of food labels, we have lots of fortified food, and yet still, as I said, American children and pregnant women suffer too from iron deficiency. Next slide. And this is my final slide. There's a lot of different parts to malnutrition, a lot of things to keep going, and yet I think it's possible. I think this is a hopeful slide, and I have actually seen that bicycle take off and deliver its firewood.